Okay, today we are checking out regiments of the Imperial Guard, Mordian Iron Guard, I think that's how you say it. This has been heavily requested and I've been getting a shit ton of reminders, not only in the comments but on the Discord. People really want me to watch this. Along with the Dark Eldar, this is one I've had for a long time and I was putting it off because it's 40 minutes long. The Imperial Guard are not really something that interests me too much about 40k, that's why I don't do so many videos on them. But you know, it's time to finally check out the Iron Guard because you guys really want me to, so we're going to do that. Yeah, this video will be split into two parts, most probably, because it is 40 minutes long, so it'll probably be approximately 25 and 25 because I will probably end up doing about 10 minutes at least of talking throughout the videos. Anyway, so yeah man, you guys let me know. Question today, who is your favorite Imperial Guard regiment? I think mine is Death Corps of Krieg for obvious reasons. If you haven't seen my reaction to that, you should go and check that one out. But yeah, we're gonna check out the Mordian Iron Guard. I mean, I hope I'm saying that right. Of course, you can subscribe if you're new. I think like 80% of people viewing the channel right now are not subscribed. So if you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe. Help support the channel, man. If you like Warhammer or you like SCP content, really I just use this channel as something, as a learning experience, you know. We go through and we learn all kinds of universes and shit like that. And we just react to fun stuff sometimes. So yeah, man, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And once you've subscribed, feel free to suggest a video you'd like me to watch in the comments. But yeah, let's get on with this video. Oh yes, by ArchWarhammer, by the way.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to yet more Warhammer 40k lore. Today we are going to be talking about another Imperial Guard regiment, namely the Mordian Iron Guard. A rather infamous regiment who has a snazzy style of dress.
This dude, bro. Oh no. Do the figures actually look like this? They are so goddamn ugly, the faces. Like, no offense, I mean the painting's nice, you know what I mean, but the faces on the guys, they're just so ugly.
The Iron Guard hail from the planet of Mordian, as their name might suggest. A rather unfortunate place to live, but not anywhere close to the worst place you could possibly live in the Imperial. It is a world that is tidally locked with its sun, which means that half of the planet is constantly bathed in lethal radiation and is utterly inimical to human life, while the other portion is bathed in eternal darkness, and it is on this side that the vast majority of the population lives.
Would it not be really, really cold if it never gets sunshine? It's eternal darkness. Yeah, it should be really cold though, bro. I bet these guys have great night vision tech though. If there's no lights, they must have some great infrared seeing stuff, you know?
Now, there is no specific mention of this in the lore for the Mordian Iron Guard. However, we know of a similar planet, where half of the planet is constantly submerged in darkness and one half constantly bathed in radiation. On that planet, only the wealthy nobility would have what is essentially retreats on the sunny side, where they would have radiation-shielded houses and huts and mini-communities for the ultra-rich, where they could enjoy the sun, as it were. And it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to assume that Mordian would have something along the same lines, but these would of course be reserved only to the extremely rich, wealthy, and the powerful.
Imagine your holiday is to the sunny part of the planet. What a holiday, bro. What a holiday. But you can only go if you're rich. So, unlucky. I mean, a lot of holidays you have to be quite rich, you know what I mean? If you really want the top quality experience, you know? But, hey man, doesn't sound like a great place to live. It just sounds like a hive world, similar. I don't know what would be worst. You know, living in an underhive. I mean, I would not want to live in a hive world. It just sounds trash, you know what I mean? I don't know where I'm going with this, let's go.
The remaining 99.9% of the population have to live in exceedingly cramped and poor conditions on the night side of the world, where they are stacked one upon the other like sardines inside of massive hive cities.
So like
and to make matters even worse, Mordian is an exceedingly poor planet. There is very little in the way of natural resources located on the planet of Mordian. In all due likelihood, one of its primary exports would probably be energy. seeing as the sunny side of this particular planet would be the perfect spot for hardened solar farms and various radiation-gathering devices.
And imperial
but
gods.
this is nowhere near enough to make a planet wealthy, and any mineral resources that the planet might once have held have long since been depleted. As such, the planet is now living at the border of extreme poverty, at the point where it might even fall so far as to be considered a non-contributing planet to the Imperium. This is a state that is about as close to death as you get within the Imperium without actually being dead. It would essentially mean that the wider Imperium would cease and desist all aid to the planet. This means that Mordia would have to feed itself. It would have to clothe itself. It would have to produce all of the various resources it needs to live by itself, as practically all trade with the wider Imperium would cease. And considering the planet's impoverished state, it is highly unlikely that the planet would be able to provide the citizens with the basic necessities for living. Which...
The Imperium is just heartless, bro. We've been through this before. As if you're not providing something, they don't give a damn. In fact, it'd probably be nicer to exterminate these guys rather than let them just die out. That's just rude. Obviously, their primary export, apart from energy, is probably their Iron Guard, you know what I mean?
As you can probably imagine, would lead to just a tad bit of unrest on the planet. In all due likelihood, it would descend into full-scale anarchy
Chaos.
And rioting within months. However, Mordia does have one resource that the Imperium is always desperate for, and that is solid and dependable fighting men and women. So as long as the Mordian Iron Guard retain their exemplary reputation, Mordia is unlikely to be thrown out into the cold, hard vacuum of space without the Imperium's protection. But what is the deal with this Iron Guard anyways? They just kind of look rather foppish, don't they? Dress uniforms on the battlefield? Ha! How silly, Willie! And, well, yes, that is kind of true. The Iron Guard are slightly different than your average Imperial Guard regiment, and that has mostly to do, again, with their home planet. As previously mentioned, their home planet is somewhat poor. Somalia-level poor.
Ouch.
And what do you think...
Why in Somalia like that, bro? I mean, if you go to Somalia and you're not, like, local, if you're white, basically, you're gonna get kidnapped. And if you go to the wrong part, or if you're alone, you're more than likely going to get kidnapped, bro. I watched a podcast with some guy who got captured by Somalian pirates, and he was there for like 2 or 3 years. And, I mean, they didn't kill him, so, you know.
Happens when you have billions of people tightly packed together in confined spaces, all suffering through the exact same hardships, the lack of food, the lack of clean air, absolutely no access whatsoever to sunlight, and the water supply could at best be described to be erratic. And finally, for the cherry on top, the piece de résistance, they all have to live in hermetically sealed, void-proof shelters on a planet that can barely afford to run the base necessities of life, e.g. a steady supply of food, air, and water. Luxuries like, for example, air cooling is entirely out of the question, which means that your average Mordian hive is essentially one step away from being a massive easy-bake oven, with the people being the cookies. So, to summarize, you're hot, you haven't eaten for days, you haven't washed for weeks, you can barely find water for drinking, never mind actually cleaning, something which is made considerably more egregious due to the fact that you live in a tiny-ass hab complex with hundreds of thousands of equally filthy people stacked.
Well, after hearing all that, I don't want to eat these cookies then. Simple as that.
One atop the other in what could at best be described as inhumane conditions. And to be entirely honest, inhumane is far, far too charitable a term. Most planets, even within the rather cramped and confined borders of the Imperium, would consider treating cows in this manner to be cruel and unusual. And if you have to live like this, day in and day out for your entire life, you might eventually think to yourself, fuck it, I'm gonna start some shit. Because honestly, at that point, anything whatsoever to get you out of the absolute miserable drudgery of everyday life might seem like a really fucking good idea. Here I'm standing in the bread lines again, and the food is late again, and up on a massive picked screen in front of you, you see a hilariously fat member of the local nobility whine about how he could only afford to operate 2 villas on the sunny side of the planet.
Yeah, that's how you start a brawl. I doubt the nobility would be eating in the same place, but that's how you start a full scale food. Well, not food fight. They need the food. Probably just fist fight. I mean, there'll be a revolt. Let's just say that rich man will no longer be very rich after. He'll be very dead, not very rich.
In such a situation, you might be excused for looking for some way to vent your frustration, and a good old-fashioned food riot might be just the answer you're looking for. Now imagine that very same scene playing out across tens of thousands of other locations across hundreds of hives involving billions upon billions of people. Powder keg is a severely lacking description for just how volatile this situation is. A more pertinent way to describe the situation might be to imagine a small glass vial filled with nitroglycerin, currently residing snugly inside the anus of a rabid ferret who has made its nest in the planet's primary nuclear defense missile stockpile. And then imagine a second ferret, equally rabid but slightly larger and bulkier, and ravenously horny. Now imagine aforementioned critter discovering the furry backside of his nitroglycerin-carrying competitor. And with that, you will have a fairly accurate idea of the situation in your average Mordian hive. As you can probably imagine, aforementioned example usually leads to a explosion. And usually that explosion will result in a considerably larger series of explosions. To attempt to halt this rather unfortunate series event, Mordian requires a vast and exceedingly effective police force. And this is where the Mordian Iron Guard comes into the picture. While most hives...
Instead of painting that really weird picture with ferrets, he could have just said, it's fucked. I would have got the picture. I think we all got the picture.
Prefer to regulate their citizens via the Adeptus Arbites or the local equivalent. Mordia has decided to skip the middleman altogether, and now keep control over their civilian masses with the military itself. Apparently, the local police forces simply wasn't effective enough. Because you see, the key to maintaining order in a situation that is in no way orderly, and imposing one's will upon an exceedingly unruly bunch of angry citizens, is to apply the correct amount of violence. Now, if your main problem is minor...
If I remember correctly from the Hive City video, the Arbites are scared of the Underhive. Or they're not fond of going down there, and they can't really do anything down there. When almost the whole Hive City is an Underhive, you know, you need some brutal guys who aren't afraid to just start firing off shots. You know what I mean? Ain't no protests for equal wages going on here, bro. Ain't no water guns being used, or what do they use? Like rubber bullets. These guys are shooting you, bro.
Uprising of riotous civilians wandering through the streets with sticks and throwing bottles at people, that will easily be resolved by a large gathering of angry police officers armed with shock mauls and truncheons. In this particular scenario, the correct level of violence is a large number of injured civilians. The key phrase there being, injured civilians. You want them to live and tell their friends of the ass-beating they received the last time they decided to step out of line. However, you do not form a firing line of shotgun-wielding Arbites and simply start target practice on their little civilian asses, because that will not go over particularly well with the other civilians. If you merely just beat the shit out of them, they will understand. They stepped out of line and therefore invited the beating. If you start just simply executing them, people might start thinking that that seems a little bit extreme, and might even get it inside their tiny little civilian minds to protest the excessive use of force. And now, you're going to have to use even more violence to correct the latest batch of individualist bastards. However, on the flip side of that very same coin, if you do not apply enough blunt force trauma to the civilian population, they might get it within their tiny little civilian minds to think, that last batch of rioters got off relatively easily.
Oh, no.
Perhaps I too should try my hand at rioting next time.
Tiny little civilian scum.
On Mordian, the authorities have tried various levels of stick to keep the civilian population in line.
Ain't no carrots,
However,
though.
it has swiftly become apparent that the only way to keep the civilians relatively quiescent is to simply shoot the motherfuckers. Because it turns out to be a relatively universal truth that a dead civilian is a thoroughly pacified civilian. And whilst in other hive cities the resulting protest after having gunned down a bunch of unarmed civilians might prove problematic, the Iron Guard will simply apply the exact same solution they used to solve the first problem. And after you have done this enough times, the civilian population will quickly realize that when the boys in blue show up, it's time to fuck off. Now, of course, I agree.
Hey, those are some Conrad Kurz-esque tactics right there. Just kill them. I mean, it's true. If you're dead, you can't commit crime or protest or do anything. But you will rile them up. It's kind of just like having a death penalty. Does it really deter you from killing or doing any crimes? Probably not. If the situation is bad enough, no matter what the crime is, unless Conrad Kurz is involved, you will probably still do it. So, I mean, I bet a lot of these guys have quite a high kill count, you know? But, you know...
that this is not the gentlest or most nuanced approach to maintaining law and order I've ever seen, but it is undeniably effective. And the shock and awe value of this rather direct and blunt form of policing is enhanced by the fact that they look kick-ass while doing it. Imagine being out rioting on an evening, throwing one's bread bowl at various other civilian protesters, and trying to tear down the officers responsible for feeding your ass. Now imagine a living phalanx of really, really hard-ass motherfuckers walking in perfect unison with bayonets twinkling and the twilight glow of the lumen globes, and all dressed up in perfectly ordered, spotless uniforms. Now imagine them assuming rank formations and leveling a veritable forest of lasguns in your direction. Trust me when I say that the overwhelming majority of people will rapidly and radically reassess their need to riot in the face of such an overwhelmingly blunt response.
I agree. If I see that coming for me, you know, I just go home, maybe run home, and maybe trip a few people so I don't get, you know, last in line. But yeah, probably quite a scary sight.
And it is this knack for pacification that makes the Iron Guard so very, very valuable to the Imperium's forces when they are on the offensive. After the Imperial Guard has conquered a planet, it is of course necessary to ensure that the planet remains conquered. And as it so happens, the local population often has certain issues which are frequently baffling and just downright silly. Like, for example, disagreeing with the Imperial authorities on matters such as the complete and utter cancellation of any and all civil liberties and general crushing of the population's spirits.
Yes.
But even the feistiest of planets will quickly quiet down after being assigned a regiment or two of Iron Guard. The local rabble-rousers will either think better of their heinous plot to overthrow their rightful rulers, or they will rather quickly suffer from an acute case of lasgun burn.
Oh.
But of course, being glorified policemen is not the only thing that the Mordian Iron Guard are pretty goddamn good at. Naturally, to create such a police force, you need to drill them quite a bit, and you also need to make sure that they remain loyal. After all, this is a military force that will primarily be cracking down on civilian unrest. It is, of course, of paramount importance to...
I thought he was going to say cracking skulls for a minute.
Make damn sure that the people sent in to quell the civilians do not themselves join the civilians. Therefore, their loyalty must be secured in no uncertain measures. Now, the ruling caste of Mordian is known as the Tetrarchs. They are the ones that control the entirety of the planet in a rather authoritarian manner. They ensure the loyalty of the Mordian Iron Guard by making sure that they get benefits that nobody else's does.
As you do.
In all due likelihood, a Meridian Iron Guardsman will receive considerable benefits that a civilian will not, and in return he becomes the embodiment of the state when it comes to maintaining order, which means undergoing an exceedingly strict regime of military training and discipline. As an example of one of the perks they are likely to receive, obviously you would not want your Iron Guardsmen to live down amongst the rabble. First and foremost, they might acquire a taste for the rabble's ideology, which would of course be counterproductive.
I was just about to say that if you let them live with the rabble, as he put it, they might just become accustomed, you know, they're going to feel like they're on the same level as the rabble, and then you don't control them. If you make them think they're better than the rabble, then they'll have no problems firing their las bolts into them, you know?
Secondly, you would not want somebody that is known to be an Iron Guardsman to live in a neighborhood of civilians, since in all due likelihood, one or more of those civvies are going to know somebody who got brutalized by said Iron Guardsman's brethren. Thusly, in all due certainty, the Iron Guard will be billeted far higher up the spires, where the living is far easier and more comfortable. In all due likelihood, they will also be allowed to bring their families. This will put the Iron Guardsmen themselves on the hook, to put it rather bluntly. If any Iron Guardsman were to be found lacking, then in all due likelihood he would be thrown out of the fraternity, including of course his family as well. So any soldier that is part of the Meridian Iron Guard, in all due likelihood, has a family whose social status and current way of living is entirely reliant upon his status within the Iron Guard. And again, if somebody that was known to be in the Iron Guard and or his family would suddenly be expelled from said organization and forced to live amongst the peasants, well, let's just say that their life expectancy is remarkably short, even by 40k standards. And it is this very same strict...
What are we saying, like 3 hours? No, that's not true, because they need to know that you're an Iron Guard first. If you somehow keep it a secret, then maybe, but once they find out, I'm sure by nightfall you'll have a nice rabble of hooligans at your door.
Discipline and unwavering faith in the command structure that allows the Iron Guard to be such a potent military force, because as I said, they are far from just a military police force. They have also distinguished themselves quite considerably on the field of battle. Their single greatest achievement was the defense of their homeworld, Mordian, against an invasion by chaos demons and traitor legionnaires. Unbeknownst to the Tetrarch rulers of Mordian, the ever-simmering discontent had grown into something considerably more dangerous. This was not some riot for food or possession of clean air, water, and any of the normal amenities that allows a human to stay alive. This was something far more sinister. Deep down in the Underhives, a cult of chaos worshippers had slowly but surely began enacting a ritual. And nobody on Mordia managed to discover that this was in fact what was going on before it was way too late. In fact, the first thing that the Tetrarchs knew about the unfolding ritual was when the skies of Mordia burst into flames, as a huge jagged rift in reality tore itself into existence above the planet, and began disgorging legions of demons and traitors onto the planet itself. This would in all due likelihood have been the end of most Imperial planets. When something like this happens, generally speaking, you will be seeing mass desertions occurring in the PDF. People will simply be giving up hope, heading home to defend their families, throwing down their weapons, or even turning to the cause of the great enemy. On Mordia, virtually none of the Iron Guard ever wavered in their dedication to protect their home planet.
That's why they're called Iron. Is this guy's eye missing, or is this meant to be blood? Just wondering, by the way.
But of course, the dedication alone is not enough. Fortuitously for the Iron Guard, they also had discipline, training, and virtually every single Iron Guardsman was a veteran. Perhaps not necessarily of outright warfare, but he had certainly fought his fair share of battles throughout the Hive cities. Granted,
that means he has a kill count. That's what that means.
what was descending upon their heads right now was considerably worse than any civilian rabble, but at the very least they had been tried and tested in combat-like situations, which meant that there was a far lesser chance that they would simply turn and run at the first sign of danger. Using this discipline and steadfastness, the Tetrarchs organized the Iron Guard into defensive cells scattered throughout their cities. Due to the rather sudden nature of the attack, no large-scale organized counterattack could be organized. Thusly, the best course of action for the Iron Guard would be to hold up in their fortified barracks and wait for further instructions. And believe you me, when we are talking about barracks, we are talking about virtual fortresses. After all, riots and large-scale civil unrest was not exactly a rare event, and thusly it would be natural for the main gathering points, the barracks and home areas of the Mordian Iron Guard, to be exceedingly heavily fortified, to ensure that no random civilian mob could overrun the main strong points of these forces before they could organize into a coherent response.
Okay, I'm gonna stop at the fortresses and continue next episode. This video is already 27 minutes long, so yeah, it's nice to start learning about these guys. We'll cover the second 20 minutes next episode, like I said. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow when this video next part comes out.